Hey everyone, this is Britton here. Sorry I'm a minute or two late. I may have bitten off more than I can chew for today's topic, but it's really important, so I want to bring it up. But as you know, I do these talks extemporaneously. I give myself about 5-10 minutes to prepare, so let's just jot down a few notes so that this isn't just totally a ramble. And today what I'm going to be talking about is kind of related to character. If you read Education, I talk about how an elite education has to focus on the entirety of man, body, mind, and spirit. And that's one of the huge failures of public education, and what I'm going to be talking about today. Public education comes out of the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, rationalism, the belief that there is no God, and that everything is just a matter of material, that there's no spirit. Man has no spirit, and everything should be dealt with rationally, through science. There should be no faith, no spirit involved. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, why that's really detrimental to children, and how that's totally perverted and destroyed the character of our children. And how actually it's replaced character training, which is what the next book is going to be all about. It's replaced character training with conditioning. Okay, so body, mind, and spirit. That was the slogan of the prep school or the boarding school that I attended. Body, mind, and spirit. You trained up your body. You wanted a strong body that was agile and strong and capable and healthy. That is part of a great man, and that goes all the way back to the Greeks. They used to train in the gymnasiums. They believed that because they actually believed in all three, so body, mind, and spirit. And because your spirit is attached to your body, they're inseparable. If you have poor health, that can affect your spirit. So those three things, body, mind, and spirit, make up a great education. We should be training all three. During the Enlightenment, this is the French Revolution, and there was some of this before the French Revolution, but it built up and exploded during the French Revolution. The French Revolution said that there is no God, or God is dead, and they didn't mean that God literally died. They mean that the concept of God is dead. The new world order that they were creating would no longer acknowledge God, and we would just see everything as material, meaning that there is no spirit. You are simply material. Your God is evolution. It's just a series of chain reactions, chemical reactions, biological chemical reactions. And that has implications for character because it means that there's no such thing as character, not in the traditional sense. There's no such thing as good and evil. Everything is a chemical reaction. Your behavior is a chemical reaction. And today you have educational psychologists or child therapists or whatever, and they'll look at your child without seeing the spirit, and they will only look at the child as a biological chemical reaction. And so they'll say that there's two things that they have to solve. If you have behavior problems, and they wouldn't even see these as evil things. There's no such thing as evil in their world. Nothing is evil, and we'll get into that. You can't name something that is evil in their world. They would say that evil is simply inconvenient. Evil is something that society doesn't agree on. They'll replace evil with criminal to say that you've broken rules, you've broken society's rules, but there's no such thing as evil. And they would say that all behavior is rooted in chemicals, it's a chemical reaction, or it is rooted in your condition, your environment, okay? So they would say if you steal, it's probably because you don't have enough. So if we just give you more, that'll solve your desire to steal. I actually wrote a list. Guys, I did make notes. I want to show you these notes I scribbled, and you'll see why I'm late. Look at that. So this is how we do it. Extemporaneous. If I didn't do extemporaneous rambling talks, I would never do them because I'm a perfectionist. My good stuff is in the books. But so these are my notes. Let me just look at them. So I have a whole list here. Okay. People steal because of their environment, because they don't have, right? They're violent because they don't know how to manage their anger. And so if you have somebody he assaults somebody, he's a violent person. It's not because he's evil. It's not because he lacks self-control. He lacks anger management. It's his mind. He doesn't know how to control his emotions. Now, I'm not saying that none of this is true. Some of it is true. But again, it denies the spirit, denies the ability of good and evil within the spirit. Addiction, it's not that you lack temperance, it's not that you lack self-control, it's that you become addicted. Now there is addiction, but you can't just treat it as a biological, environmental problem. It affects your spirit. That's a spiritual problem when you become addicted to something. If you're an abuser, let's say you abuse your kids or something, they say, well, you probably had a bad childhood. Now again, you might have had a bad childhood, but they're going to see that as not that you're a bad person, not that you're doing evil things. You are a product of your environment. You really have no free will. You're a chemical reaction responding to your environment. If you act up in school, you have a chemical imbalance. Now, this one is really controversial. Many people in the homeschooling world believe their kids have chemical imbalances. I'm not going to debate the medical side of that today. I'm just saying I had one of those. I was one of those kids who had a chemical imbalance. I was a super good kid going up to about 4th grade, just super good kid. Never had any troubles, never had any chemical imbalances. Then in 5th grade, I go to a new school, and I discovered, I'd never really been popular, by the way. And then I go to a new school, I become really popular. I discovered that just by sassing my teacher, just by doing crazy, outrageous things, and I'm not going to tell you all, but I mean, we did some crazy things. We'd start fires in the toilet, in the boys' room. It was pretty crazy. My buddy had a lighter. We put a whole bunch of toilet paper in there. We started a fire, flush it. Then we'd run to the principal's office and be like, "Somebody started a fire in the boys' room." We did that like 3 times. And finally, the principal was like, "Are you guys starting the fire?" No. And then my buddy, like a few weeks later, he got caught. So I was a bad kid, but I realized I was a bad kid because of a spiritual thing. I lacked self-control. I had the pride of everybody kind of like thinking I was so cool, and I was a class clown. I was suddenly popular, and it went straight to my head. I became very vain, and I didn't care about authority. So it was a spiritual thing. But again, they don't believe in that. So what do? They wanted me tested. They wanted me tested for ADD. They decided I had a chemical imbalance. Now, when they find these chemical imbalances, did they take some sort of blood test and like, oh, he's deficient in these chemicals? No, it's really just driven by your behavior. But again, they won't correct that behavior. There's hardly any discipline in school. Sometimes they separate you, but there's hardly, like with detention and stuff, but there's hardly any discipline in school because they don't believe in it. They believe it's all driven by chemicals and your environment. And so what they'll do is they'll give you a tranquilizer. He's acting up in school. He has a chemical imbalance. We don't know what it is. We're going to tranquilize him, turn him into a zombie. So that's another one. That's ADD. And I know it's offensive. Some people think they have it. Maybe it's true. Maybe ADD is true. And I'm certainly not saying that there are no cases where there's a psychological problem that needs treated with medication. I'm not saying that, but I'm not saying that either. Learning disabilities, same thing. If kid is getting bad grades, it might be because he has a learning disability, he's often sent to an office. But if you look at those special education offices, a lot of them will tell you they're dealing with bad kids, troubled kids. They have bad behavior, they have bad attitude, and the reason their grades are so slow is not because they have a learning disability, but often because they have a character deficiency. They lack self-control, they lack motivation, they lack the discipline, they lack drive, they lack respect for authority, and so they don't do their schoolwork, and that's why they're suffering. It was funny when I was in the military. I went through some advanced training. And part of it was going to a language school, Chinese. I did Chinese for 6 months. And we had kids in there, or men in there they're training for Green Berets. They've tried out, they've been selected, they're super tough people. And in their mind, they're like, oh, I can't handle the language school, I'm super scared of it, I'm not a smart person. When I was in school, I got bad grades and I have all these learning disabilities. But all of a sudden, they just did really well in language school because it wasn't in the head, it was a character thing. They didn't want it in school. They didn't respect the authority. But now that they wanted it, now that they had that drive, that strength of character to endure that they picked up through the military, they had no problem with their academics. So a lot of that is tied to character, but we don't think of it that way. When parents have an issue with their kids in school, they usually think, oh, I need a tutor. It's a learning thing, or maybe he has a chemical imbalance. I need to help him focus with some drugs. Okay, and of course, there is no such thing as lust anymore. There's only orientation, sexual orientation. And that's, again, you don't believe in the Spirit, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in good and evil. Then if you have this desire, it must simply be psychological, tied to your body's chemistry, or it is tied to your environment. And we wouldn't say that, and in that case, there's no such thing as lust, there's no such thing as anything that's wrong. The reason I'm doing this talk today is we posted something in a group, and I forget how far gone America is. We posted something in a mostly Christian, homeschooling group that my wife runs, True Aim Education. And you would think this is not controversial. You think everybody would agree. But we're talking about how they're starting to normalize pedophilia. And we said this was coming. We said this was coming when they started to normalize other sexual perversions. And they say, well, they always start off with, oh, it's a psychological disorder. It's a disorder because it's so not normal. And so we need to treat them. And that takes away the burden. You can no longer discipline these people. They're not doing anything wrong. It's not lust. They have to be treated. They always start there. And then the next step, they turn around and they say, actually, it's offensive to say it's a psychological condition. It's just normal. And that's the next step. And they're doing that with pedophilia now. They're taking that first step. And they did the same thing with transgenderism. It was gender dysphoria. They're not doing anything wrong. Like the Bible says, they're not cross-dressing or doing anything wrong. They have gender dysphoria, psychological condition, because it's biological, chemical environment, right? We need to treat that condition. So then again, everybody says, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, we just got to tolerate these people. We got to treat them. We got to help them. And then suddenly it becomes illegal to treat those people. Literally, it becomes illegal to treat them. You have to celebrate them. It's normal now. It's accepted. There's nothing wrong with it. And we're seeing the same thing happen with pedophilia now. It used to be, that was the one thing everybody agreed. They were despicable people. If you have an attraction to young, pre-adolescent children, like there's something depraved in you. We would say from the biblical perspective, you've gone down the road of perversion. You've become a very wicked and depraved person. You do need help. You don't need psychological help. We'll get to that. You need spiritual help. You need repentance. You need to acknowledge the wickedness, your sin. You need to repent, and you need to start the road of penance and recovery. But we don't believe that anymore. So they've already started now. They're saying that pedophilia, there was TED Talks, there was a movie that I think Netflix just released, a documentary, and it was painting them as victims, that who would want to live this way? Everybody hates us. We can't help ourselves. We're not acting on it, so we're not bad. And I was surprised how many Christians had bought that hook, line, and sinker again, that it's just a matter of chemical, that they can't entract it. They can't control themselves. And you know what? If they act on it, then again, it's still not their fault, right? Because there's no free will. That can never be normal. Thank you. Hello. Hey, Sharon. Yeah, it can never be normal. It will be. They will try to normalize it. I don't know when Christians will finally draw the line and say enough's enough. But again, if it's not their fault, if they can't help themselves, if everything is a product of environment, if everything is a chemical reaction, then we have no reason to be angry at these people. They can't control themselves. It's not their fault. And that's why we're seeing just the rampant demise of our culture. We're seeing this rampant just growing of sin in our culture, and we can't fix it. The schools, they have all of their psychologists, they have all of their counseling, they have all of their techniques and their anger management courses, and we just see the kids are just growing in rage and in degeneracy and in lust, because again, it's not just the environment. It's not just the chemical reaction. There is a victim in that situation. Yeah, there is. But actually what they're trying to say is that there's two victims. There would be the child, but then there's also the perpetrator. He's a victim because he can't control himself. It's just an attraction. We don't have control over attractions, which is also not true. And I'll talk about that later sometime, but of course we do. But yeah, they're trying to make it that there's two victims there. So we should actually feel sorry for these people. And so yeah, they would say that children can't consent, so we need to keep them away. But again, they're going to treat it like we're an animal. Like if a wolf attacks you, it's not because he's evil, it's because he's hungry. See, that's where they're going with it. They don't believe in evil anymore. And you may have to separate the wolf or cage the wolf, or you may even have to euthanize the wolf, but you'd never say the wolf is evil. And that's exactly what they're perpetuating with human beings now, that it's just environment, it's just a chemical reaction. Okay, so yeah, but I totally agree, Sharon. I'm never going to go there. I don't believe in any of it. I believe in the tradition that we are three things: body, mind, and spirit. And I believe that you can train the spirit, and that if you... And I actually believe that once you understand, like, for example, lust or perversion, if you look at, what's that guy? I think it was Ted Bundy. I mean, he was like a serial killer, depraved person. And he talks about how he grew up in a really nice home. He had Christian parents. And what happened was he got a hold of pornography at a very young age, and he started to grow, and he started to need deeper and deeper, because lust is never satisfied. It always grows. It starts off very minor. Remember, you think back in the day, like 50 years ago, bikinis on TV were very scandalous. People were up in arms. Now that seems so silly, because we've gone so far down the rabbit hole that they'll show anything on TV now. They're showing everything on TV now. And it doesn't shock us anymore, because lust is never satisfied. It continues to grow. And it can't be treated as a psychological condition. It's not a chemical imbalance. Sin is a spiritual disease, and you have to treat it with spiritual things. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to remind you that your kid has a spirit, that the spirit is probably the most important part of your child's, it's his will, and it is tied to educational problems, it's tied to behavior problems, and I see too many parents, and they're looking to change the environment, or they're looking to get him some sort of therapy, and those therapists, that's what they'll do. They'll start digging in the child's background to see what kind of environment he came from, and they'll start medicating them. And you'll never see a case where they go to the therapist, they start taking all of their pills, and they like come out as a normal person, their behavior improves. Usually it starts a downward spiral, and it starts with the belief that we are merely matter. that there is no spiritual nature to us. Where you see other people, I think of Kanye West. I feel really bad because I actually wrote in this next book. I've gone back and I put a disclaimer like, okay, this was Kanye before he was a Christian. But I talk about Kanye West and what a bad person he is. But again, he in the beginning, and maybe a little bit still, but he believed that his degeneracy was stemming out of psychological conditions. I don't know if he's bipolar, he thinks, or something, but and so he's treating that with medication. And then he finds Jesus, he becomes a Christian, and rapidly we see a change in Kanye, and I hope it stays, but rapidly when you heal the spirit, all that other stuff will follow. And you realize maybe he didn't have all those conditions, maybe it was a spiritual problem. When we discipline our children for greatness, we need to remember that they have a spirit. We need to remember that we need to train that, and that's what this next book will be about. It'll be about forming your children's character for greatness. We do believe in character. Environment is important. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Health is important. People say, well, if the kid eats too much sugar cereal, he can't sit still. True and not true. If a kid eats a lot of sugar, yeah, it's gonna make him want to be energetic, but if his character is strong enough, he can still control it, probably. But I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Yeah, the body is tied to the spirit. You can't treat them as different things. So is the mind. You have to treat all three. And what I'm saying, the problem with public school is they deny the spirit. They completely deny it. They think everything can be solved with science. And someday I'll do a talk on that, on why science isn't enough and why rationalism isn't very rational. So anyway, okay, I hope that helps, guys. I do these things as kind of, okay, as an ex-police officer, I will never feel sorry for them. I will not feel sorry for them. I do feel sorry for what they've done to themselves. I feel sorry for the judgment that's coming. I do hope and pray that they can be redeemed. I don't think that it's our job to redeem. I mean, I don't want to get into the treatment of pedophilia. I'm all about the death penalty for those sort of things. I still believe in that. I still believe in corporal punishment for criminals, but that's a totally different topic. All I wanted to talk about today was basically body, mind, and spirit. Just remember, you have a spirit. Do not go down that road. Do not go down that road. If you have trouble with your kids spiritually, read my character book. It taps back into the old belief, the old faith, and it talks about how the church used to deal with serious sins, and how, remember, the church is a powerful thing. It transformed Rome. It took the most pagan of pagan cultures. You wouldn't believe some of this. Actually, you will. You're starting to see it again. But you wouldn't believe some of the stuff that the Romans did. They took that, they transformed it. They are the ones that established the laws of honor that became the hallmark of Western Christian culture throughout Europe. They transformed Rome. That was with the belief of spirit and God and Jesus. They transformed it. We've denied those things. And if you do those, if you go to the psychologist and you get the pills for the kids and you believe that it's just a matter of environment and you start catering the kid that way, you will grow the problem. You won't help the problem. Remember, I told you when I was in school, I was a pretty bad kid and they wanted to drug me, and they never solved it, by the way. They did all sorts of things to solve it. Finally, my mom got wise. She sent me to a military boarding school, a prep school in Virginia. They solved it in an afternoon. I mean, when I walked on the campus, I knew I was in a different place. They didn't believe in any disorders. They said, if you have ADD, I'll take you you can wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go for a 10-mile run with the commandant. And they're like, and if you still have some ADD, we'll take you for another run. We'll burn that energy. So that's how they treated it. And it was amazing how amazing. It wasn't a process. They didn't do counseling sessions or therapy. They just set standards. They enforced them. They expected us to behave at this level. They transformed us in an afternoon with character training. They didn't cater to any of us. They didn't interview any of us and ask us what conditions we had or what medication we needed. We had a 2-hour study time. That was painful. They didn't ease us into that. The first night, you sat down, you studied for 2 hours. I eased my children into it. It was pretty brutal the first night. And you couldn't talk. You couldn't get out of your seat or anything. You just sat there for 2 hours and studied. And the first night I lasted like 15 minutes. This is not because of a brain thing. It wasn't ADD. I hadn't built up the strength of character, of diligence, of self-control to sit there and focus that long. But once I did that, like once the school, they knew I could handle it. They knew that I was capable of it. They just assumed that. And then I didn't see anybody not rise to the occasion. By the end of it, pretty much all of us were in line. Some of us went home and behaved badly, but we didn't behave badly in their company because they didn't tolerate it. But I mean, people, if the modern liberals saw what went on at some of these prep schools, they'd be scandalized because it's not the modern ways, and they tell you how it's harmful to children and it ruins us. But every kid that I talked to that went there, it knows that it transformed their life. It knows that even though it was painful at times, it was powerful, and it really even kids who've gone astray later after prep school look back and like, yeah, that time, like it really helped me. I don't know where I'd be without it. I feel that way myself. So anyway, it's just a totally different worldview and how you discipline children. I'm going to take you back in this next book, and it's not just about discipline, it's just character training in general. I'm going to take you back to the ancient art of training character for greatness, the tried and true methods. We're gonna debunk a lot of the modern nonsense that isn't working, that's absolutely destroying our kids, that's making them suicidal, dysfunctional, rebellious, irresponsible. We're gonna dispel all of that, and we're gonna go back to the traditional way of raising children with great character. So, okay, guys, if I don't cut it off now, I will. I'll keep talking forever. I wish I would have followed my notes more. I had a lot more to say, guys. If that doesn't make sense, please ask questions, because I do these talks as rambles off the top of my head. It's so much easier to lay them out in a book, and I can just flow, and I don't know what you're not getting. Where the editor's like, I didn't understand that part. I can go back and tweak it. We do these talks. If you guys have questions, if something I said didn't sound right or resonate, please ask it, and I can clarify it while I'm live. So much easier to do it too while I'm live. So I know that we have a lot of new people in the group. Remember, I always go live at 7 o'clock on Wednesday. I might not next week because I'll be on vacation. That's the only week I plan on missing, and if Christmas, I guess, fell on it or something on a Wednesday. But please ask questions if something doesn't sound right. I'm really here for you guys to answer your questions. If you guys have questions, you're watching this video later, ask them below, and I'll either answer them in my next video, or if I can quickly answer them, I'll do it in the comments. Thank you guys so much for being part of this group, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.